Hi, everybody. Welcome to AstroPath's latest video. This one is on the Aquarius Full Moon that's happening on August 19th, 2024 at 2:25 p.m. Eastern Time. So please adjust for your time zone. Before I delve more into that, let me just say that AstroPath is a combination of Lori Farrington of Astrolore. She goes with lorifarrington.com or astrolore.org for her websites. And I am Jenny Date of Hidden Path Astrology, and that's hiddenpathastrology.com. You can find all of our links to all of our social media and so on in the notes below, so check those out. And unfortunately today, Lori is not here with us. She's not feeling well, and we decided together that I should just go ahead and make this video so that you all still get our content for this season. And she still made the graphics for all this, which I really appreciate, so thank you, Lori. And this kind of actually goes with our thing that we've just been thinking about, making these full moon videos shorter and more digestible. And then the seasonal ones will stay longer as they have been. But anyway, so it kind of gives us an opportunity to try something new. And that's basically it. We're going to go ahead and start right away by sharing the chart of the moment for the Aquarius full moon. And here we go. Here we have it. Okay. So first of all, let's just talk about the fact that yes, we are in Leo season. You can see here up at the top, you can see the sun shining brightly in Leo there. Actually, let me just get some annotation tools here. But yeah, you can see the sun nicely there. And so by definition, a full moon means that the moon is going to be absolute dead opposite the sun. So here it is down here. And that is indeed true. The moon is at 27 Aquarius. So what you can notice first and foremost is that we are at the end of Leo season. So this full moon is an opportunity to take a look at all that has transpired since the sun moved into Leo, which happened on July 22nd. So it's interesting, it's coming at the very end of the season because it really gives you a chance to kind of pause and assess how the last few weeks have been for you. So let's just talk a little bit about Leo, just some reminders. Leo is about your creative radiance. Leo is very tightly connected to the sun. And so it really is how you shine out. It's a very gregarious, outward, creative sign. Leo has the archetype of the performer. And so kind of has that whole outward, hey, look at me, being the center of attention reputation. In the spectrum of things, yes, Leo can be egotistical. Leo can be arrogant when it's out of balance and when it's lost its way. However, when Leo is in its most positive space, it's gorgeous, it's big, it's bright, it's beautiful, it shines its light to help everybody else see the way. So that's just a quick 2 cents about Leo. Aquarius, as its opposite, is an air sign, and so it's much more aloof. It's still outward, it's still a yang sign, so it's still concerned with social expression. But in this case, Aquarius is much more, say, broad-minded than Leo. It's much more concerned with the collective. It's concerned with groups and community and your social circles. So what the Aquarius full moon really does during Leo season is it draws your attention out of yourself and into the bigger picture of the people and community around you. So that's just really quick in a nutshell how those two things work together. As a zodiac sign, Aquarius, it's fixed air. So it can be very futuristic. It can see far, far into the future. It's an intellectual sign, so it can really look at all things in the mindscape. So it's not concerned about what's realistic yet. It's not concerned about what can be made into tangible form. It's just concerned about the ideas and inventiveness. In our day and age, I think Aquarius has a lot to do with our technology. Certainly, Pluto moving into Aquarius, which happened last year, is a sign of the movements in technology. And we can certainly point to AI as a major event that has happened since Pluto has been in Aquarius. So just to point out that those are some of the topics that are associated with Aquarius. As far as an Aquarius moon, like in a natal chart, if it's out of balance, it can be very detached. It can be unwilling to feel emotions, and just sort of exit the situation pretty quickly and pretty easily because it wants to be in that mental space and leave the emotions behind. So that's kind of the darker face of Aquarius, an Aquarius moon, in a natal chart. And then the more positive face is it just has this ability to get perspective. It can take a break, it can take a pause and get space from those difficult emotions and see the bigger picture and think about other people in a selfless kind of way. So that's what it brings to us during this Leo season, is a moment in time to kind of step back and ask yourself, how are you impacting the collective? Is what you think about on a personal level something that's insightful and impactful for your social circle, for your community, for the collective at large? So that's kind of what it brings in. And again, it really is just a moment in time, this full moon. It's a moment to really, consider that Aquarius part of your chart, before we move into Virgo season. Okay, so hopefully that explains a little bit about what we're looking at. So the Leo new moon happened on August 4th. That's when the moon was back right next to the sun, earlier on in the season. And then it has come all the way around and it cruised through Virgo, it went through Libra, went through Sagittarius, Capricorn, and till it arrived in Aquarius to oppose the sun 2 weeks later. After it departs the full moon, it will go into the other half of the zodiac and pass through the waning half moon, and it will then rejoin the sun for the Virgo new moon in a couple of weeks. So that's just the quick version of the cycle of where it's all going. Okay, so let's just talk about this chart for a minute before we move into individual impacts. So the first thing about the chart is obviously the sun and the moon opposing each other. But what is really interesting in this chart is that there is a very tight square to Uranus here. So this makes a T-square. You'll notice that the sun and the moon are at 27 degrees. Uranus is also at 27 degrees in Taurus. So this is a very tight square. And also I see that Lori has included the little sun moon midpoint. That just shows you how tight it is. So this just really brings in the radical change that's happening all around us. What comes to mind is, there's changes in our environment, there's changes in our politics, there's changes in everybody's personal life. I mean, I can think of multiple examples of people going through dramatic change, and I'm betting that you can too. So this full moon, so you already have the full moon that I've described, and then Uranus is placing a ton of pressure on this full moon axis. That's what the square does. A square is tension or friction. What's really interesting is, I mean, it really makes what's called a T-square in astrology, and some of you may have heard of that. For those of you who haven't, it's just a fancy word for having two planets in opposition and then another one squaring them, exactly like this. So Aquarius here is presenting, well, the moon in Aquarius is presenting the possibility of maintaining an even keel, of standing your ground, of knowing who you are on a personal level, which is what Leo brings in the face of change, which is what Uranus is symbolizing. Uranus is an outer planet, and it's been in Taurus since 2018. So this is the machinations of change, the slow, inexorable change that's been happening to our society and to things in general. In Taurus, it has shown as an upset in things to do with money, things to do with resources, things to do with food, things to do with the physical body. So those are all things that are in play here. And so at this Aquarius full moon, it's essentially your job to ask yourself how you can maintain some sort of even keel emotionally despite all these crazy things happening around us. So that is what we'll address in the individual impacts. Now, this chart has a second T-square in it, a second configuration. And I will just highlight that one. We have Venus opposing Saturn. Okay. And that is being squared by Mars and Jupiter together, which is also squaring Saturn. So not only do we have one T-square configuration, but we have a second. So a T-square is an inherently unstable configuration. It is the scene that's kind of happening when there is growth that must occur, development must occur. Anything under this type of developmental tension is going to have to deal with it. You can't be ignored. So that's what the T-squares brings in. So there's a lot of stress in this chart, but it's also very dynamic. It's huge opportunities for development and growth. So this T-square brings in Venus is the quick moving planet. So it's the one kind of creating this configuration as a whole. It's opposite from Saturn. So that's kind of this standoff in maybe your relationships or your values with the insistence on some kind of structure or container or limits. There's definitely limits being put on all of us in some way here. And in this case, so limits on resources or limits in your relationships somehow. When you add in this really strong, first of all, conjunction between Mars and Jupiter, but squaring that tension about limits, this is requiring some kind of action. And with Mars and Jupiter in the mix, it's a big, loud, overt, exuberant type of action. In this case, it's in Gemini. So there's some kind of something that needs to be spoken about. You need to address these limits through speaking about them. So expansion is going to come through communication, but no matter what, it's still going to be contained by that square to Saturn. So just a lot going on that day. The last thing I'll say, and then we'll move on to individual impacts, is that there's also one smoother connection, which is a sextile between the moon and Chiron, and then the sun trines that Chiron. So this kind of adds the finishing touch of like, okay, and all of this is for healing. All of this is to learn how to address what Chiron represents, which Chiron represents the way we personally and collectively use force, use our outward energy, and in the negative, Aries can be very oppressive. It's the masculine out of balance, so violence, that sort of thing. But in the positive, it represents people owning their stuff and making their own plans and understanding how they individually fit into collective concerns. So that's just a nice little touch of like, okay, if things get hard, if things are difficult around this full moon, just keep in mind that there is healing that needs to happen, and that's what the bigger story is. And growth is not inherently bad. It just it can be challenging, you know, but we all need to grow and respond to stress in our life. So, okay. Well, hopefully I've covered most of this. Let me just gonna erase some of these here. And before we move on, so just bear with me for a second here. I guess the last piece I just want to say before I delete this one is that the Saturn-Jupiter cycle is a much bigger, slower cycle that's kind of in the backdrop of our personal lives. And that one started December 21st, 2020. The new cycle began between Jupiter and Saturn. So anyway, just wanted to mention that. We might make a video about that. So there you go. Okay. We are now moving along. Okay, so we're going to move to let's see. Okay, hold on. Bear with me for 1 second here. Okay. There we go. Okay, folks. So we are now going to talk about the individual impacts. Alrighty. First of all, we always start with Aries. It's just the way that it is. Okay. Those of you with Aries rising, this full moon in Aquarius is falling in your 11th house. That is your social groups. That's your community. Those are your alliances. These can be groups that are in your workplace. It could be a large circle of friends. It also is those folks that are in your yoga class or your workout class or all of those kinds of things too. So this is your community, those faces around you that you recognize, that you know support you, even if you don't know their personal story. So that's what the Aquarius full moon is lighting up and illuminating. Leo season, on the other hand, where the Leo sun is, has been happening in your 5th house. So it's really highlighting your creativity. It's highlighting your willingness to take risks. It might be highlighting your relationship with children, if you have children in your life. And it's definitely highlighting your willingness to have fun and be generous and express your love to those around you. So that's kind of what the season has brought you. And now with the Aquarius full moon, you're really getting to see the impact of all of your creativity, your willingness to give love on your community. Like how you show up through those creative ways is having an impact on the community. And really, this is giving you an incentive to carry on with your creative pursuits, to carry on with your generosity, because you can really see that it does have an impact on other people. Meanwhile, just to kind of add in the T-square of Uranus as well, there has been a lot of change going on in the way you value yourself. This might be your money and your resources that have been changing, but it could also be psychologically your way that you view yourself. So that's where the kind of the bigger story has been unfolding for a while. And this Aquarius full moon is allowing you to show how you've responded to that stress. And, hopefully you've found a way to value yourself more, you've found a way to love yourself more, and you've really found a way to trust that you have a great deal of resource for other people. And so that's kind of the bigger story. And at the full moon, you're sort of saying, hey, uh, how has this impacted my community? What has changed in my community since the beginning of Leo season and over the course of the past few years? Okay. We are now going to go to Taurus rising. So those of you with Taurus rising. Okay. Those of you with Taurus rising, this Aquarius full moon is landing in your 10th house of your profession. This is the most public house in the whole chart. So this is how you show up in public. Whether or not you have a profession or a job is not really what matters. It's how you are seen by the public around you. So that's what the Aquarius full moon is showing you. It's showing you something about this. It's letting you see that there's some way you can impact the world at large through whatever has been coming about through your profession. Now, Leo season, in contrast, has been highlighting for you things about your family and home. So this could be something about your physical house, the land that you live on, or the place that you live in. It could have something to do with your lineage. You may have been reflecting on particularly your maternal lineage, but your lineage in general. That could be another theme that's come up through this Leo season. Or you may have seen something come to light about your family members, the family of origin. So it could be parents or what you grew up in, but also who you live with now and what your whole home life looks like now. So ask yourself what has gone on in these few weeks, and what has been happening for you that has to do with your home. Oh, and also it could be your inner home, how you think of yourself, how you have your own emotional foundation, how you meet your own needs is also something that's been showing up during Leo season. And now with this Aquarius full moon, you're getting a chance to see how that light that's being shed down into your roots is impacting your professional life and how you want to be seen, how you want to show up in your professional life. and how you can impact the collective through your own creative understanding. Meanwhile, the planet Uranus, which is so tightly squaring this full moon, is in your first house, and it's in Taurus in the first house. And so there's a big change in the way that you view yourself, in the way that you show up in the world, in the way that other people view you. There's a big shift happening there. And this full moon is merely an opportunity to really work with that larger change, to see how far you've come, certainly in the last few weeks, but in the last few years, what has changed about the way that you view yourself and show up and occupy space. So those are a few thoughts for those of you with Taurus rising. We are now going to move on. And we are going to talk about, let's see, those of you with Gemini rising. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. Okay, those of you with Gemini rising, this full moon is landing in your 9th house. So the 9th house is a wonderful place, really. It's where you show your wisdom. It's where you have your worldview, your life philosophy that you've developed through the accumulation of experiences throughout your life. And it's your critical thinking. It's your own personal philosophy. It's a part of your self-expression. And as a Gemini rising person, you know, this is very tightly tied to how you show up as with your intellect in the world. And in particular, what's your humanitarian view? Like, what is happening with that? So that's what the full moon is illuminating. Meanwhile, during Leo season, there's been a big emphasis on your 3rd house. So the short version of that is your communication, how you communicate with other people, your communication style. How has that been impacted these last few weeks? How have you found yourself having conversations that are different, or things that, you know, when you have that great conversation and you just feel really enthused and inspired by it? It's that kind of thing that during these last few weeks that you've had. Now, the 3rd house is also your immediate environment. So for that reason, it brings in your neighborhood, it brings in your corner store, you know, your little bike ride that maybe you took around the neighborhood. All of those kinds of things are also part of where Leo's showing up for you. And also your siblings, because your siblings are part of your immediate environment when you're growing up. So your siblings can come into play here too. So maybe you've had a great interaction with a sibling. That would be one way to interpret this in these past few weeks. But at any rate, this Aquarius full moon is giving you a chance to kind of transfer those daily conversations and inspirations that you've had and transfer it into your overall philosophy. Like, what are the takeaways? What are the things that you've learned that you are now willing to sort of disperse as part of your self-expression? One other thing I'll say about this axis is this is the learning axis. This is very much like what you learn in the 3rd house, and then the 9th house is higher education, how you turn that learning into not only a source of wisdom, but your future profession, or where you choose to travel in your life. Like, those are also things that are part of the 9th house. So that is what's showing up dramatically here for those of you Gemini rising. In the opening section here, I talked a lot about the planet Uranus, which is in Taurus and has been since 2018. And that Uranus, that planet of change, awakening, disruption, it has been in your 12th house for many years now. And it is putting pressure on this full moon. So you're really getting a chance to kind of see, what are the fruits of your labors? What has changed about the way you handle your subconscious patterns? What has changed about perhaps your spiritual practice, or perhaps the way that you're, you know, impacting things from an administrative level? That could be another meaning of the changes happening in your 12th house. It's also possible that you've been through some illness or been through some kind of suffering. And this moment in time at the full moon gives you a moment to reflect on that and reflect on the greater meaning of all of that and what you've learned from it, as difficult as it might have been. So those are all some topics that may come up for you at the Aquarius full moon. Okay, we are now going to move on to those of you with Cancer rising. Okay, just grab some water here. Alrighty, so those of you with Cancer rising, this full moon is really illuminating that place that has to do with your, I guess it's the way you handle other people's values. I was going to say your boundaries, which is certainly part of it too. So the full moon is really showing you, like, what boundaries do you need? Where have you been able to set boundaries that have served you? Where do you still need some work? Or where have you been perhaps too aloof in the way that you've set boundaries over these past few weeks? It's also just letting you know how you are able to set some space and some parameters around intense emotional stuff of other people. So that's kind of, it's giving you a little benchmark, a little bit of a lantern into the way you handle those difficult issues. The eighth house is never never an easy place, because it really reflects the difficulties of other people, including their emotional baggage. So eighth house is challenging. It also has to do with secrets. And it also is a reminder that how important those rituals might be for you, those daily rituals that help you stay grounded, or what you do when you feel upset or you've had a difficult interaction with someone else. How do you handle that? Now, this has all happened against the backdrop of Leo season. Leo season has really illuminated and highlighted things to do with your finances, things to do where perhaps you struggle with self-esteem issues, or perhaps you do value yourself and you do deeply love yourself and you know that. In any case, it's really illuminating wherever you are in that process. So for those of you with Cancer rising, Leo season is probably not the easiest placement for you, because it's always bringing up that stuff around values. And this full moon in particular is always going to bring up that contrast between you and how you value yourself, and then other people and how they value themselves and all of their baggage and how that kind of interacts. So it's kind of a messy stew, but it's also powerful. There's a lot of resources here. There's a lot of power to be unlocked from figuring out how to balance these areas, especially as an emotional person, which a Cancer rising person typically is. Meanwhile, Uranus has been in your 11th house. It's placing a great deal of change or pressure on the full moon axis here. So there's been some, bigger shifts going on in your life since 2018. That's what Uranus has been in Taurus since that date. So there's been some shifts here in your community. And right now that's really bringing some pressure to this full moon situation. So really, again, it's just a moment in time. So it's giving you a little window into what changes have you made about community, what changes do you still need to make, how have you been feeling about those shifts, and it's really giving you a chance to kind of look at all that and navigate that. Okay, I think that's about it for Cancer rising. We are now going to go on to those of you who have Leo rising. Okay, so for those of you with Leo rising, this really just brings a whole lot of light at the full moon to the polarity that refers to self and other in the most simple way. So the moon is in your 7th house of partnership, and that's showing you whatever's happening in your partnerships at this time. With Aquarius here, there might be some big questions about your ability to stay emotionally present to other people. You just need to ask yourself, like, are you able to do that? I mean, on the other hand, you might be a person who you need a lot of freedom in relationships. So you know how to set those boundaries and establish that with your partner and have good communication. So those are some of the topics this full moon is bringing up. Leo season really brings a lot of light to just the way you move about in the world. As a Leo rising person, you are someone who brings light to other people. You just, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not. So I know some very shy people with this. but you are that beacon as you're walking around. So that's the space you're occupying during every Leo season. And then this full moon kind of brings in the, well, how does that affect your partners? And this can be your marriage partner, your business partner, or it could be any one-on-one interaction that you're having. All of those things are coming into play during this Leo season. So think about what has happened in the past few weeks, what has come to light about these topics. And then also consider that the planet Uranus has been in your 10th house since 2018. So think about what are the changes that have happened for you since 2018 that have to do with your profession, that have to do with your public life. As I'm going to imagine, and I can think of some people like this, there's been a lot of shifting and moving and shaking in this area of your life. So this moment in time on August 19th at this full moon, you're really getting a look into that. Where are you now? You know, how is this impacting your partnerships and your ability to express yourself? That is essentially what is coming into question here. So think about that. And best of luck in all those things. And we are now going to move on to those of you with Virgo rising. Alrighty. Okay, so those of you with Virgo rising, Aquarius is in your 6th house, and that's where the full moon is landing, and that's what the full moon is lighting up. The 6th house does have to do with matters of health, but it's in the sense that it's the preventative routines that you do to help your health, you know, so that's why you exercise. That's why you make sure you get good sleep. That's what you're doing when you're thinking about how to eat each day. These are the daily mundane habits that end up making up the whole fabric of your life. You know, so this full moon is shining a light into, you know, any and all of those issues. Like, what is your lifestyle? What are some places that you might need to make some adjustments? I think one of the things this brings up for me is just with Aquarius here is, you know, the way you take care of yourself is what allows you to help other people. Like if you're ill, or you're, you know, not sleeping well, it's hard for you to show up for others because you're just struggling for yourself. Now, if you're ill, you just need to focus on yourself and do self-care and let yourself get better and get the rest that you need. That's super important. And with Aquarius here, you know, go ahead and take that space that you need to do that. It's really important. But it also can illuminate just, you know, some shifts that you'd like to make as you age. So those are things that are on your mind during this full moon, possibly. Leo season for you has very much been behind the scenes in the 12th house. The 12th house is very hidden from view. It's the unseen forces that we may not even think about much in our lives. But this is the giant picture, the giant questions like, why do we exist? You know, and then what is your spirituality that is tied into that? It also can be a connection to things like ancestors, ghosts, just unseen spiritual forces that you can't describe, you know, like energy work could be part of this access. It also might be a way that you are able to channel information that you don't even know where it comes from. So during Leo season, it really kind of highlights whatever your intuitive capacity is, or whatever your capacity is to tap into that much larger picture of those unseen things. And it kind of comes about by bubbling up into your subconscious. So there's also a very therapeutic focus with the 12th house about what's happening in your subconscious. So that's the axis that comes into play during this full moon. Those are some of the issues and concerns that this is bringing up for you. So think about whatever's been going on for you. And one other thing is that both of these are concerned with learning. So there's a fluidity and openness to what's happening in these houses, like just letting things come to you. And meanwhile, the planet Uranus has been cruising through your 9th house, making waves, making change since 2018. That's the bigger story. So what has gone on where your world philosophies change, or you've been on some major travels, or perhaps you've pursued some kind of higher education degree, you know, or perhaps you've had legal trouble. That could be another thing. Or you've published something. Those are all pieces that can be in flux as Uranus is up there in your ninth house, putting pressure on this full moon axis. So at the full moon, take a moment and reflect on what are some of those bigger topics at play in your life. What has happened in the last few weeks that really has come to light? And then how is this of service or of help to the collective? How does your thread that you're weaving fit into the fabric of everything else? Okay. So hopefully that made some sort of sense. And now we are going to move on to those of you who have Libra rising. Okay. Alrighty. So those of you who have Libra rising, this Aquarius full moon is just shining a big old bright beam of light for a few days in your fifth house of creativity. So the fifth house is one of the ways that you express yourself. And as a Libra rising person, a lot of your self-expression is about the air signs. So that means how you think, how you socialize, how you communicate with other people are all going to be very, very important parts of your personal self-expression. So for those of you with Aquarius in the fifth house and this full moon landing in the fifth house, this is really shining a light on whatever those creative things are. I mean, this is the way that you have fun. This could be the way you recreate, like maybe you're a cyclist or a swimmer, or you like to get out on the water. That is all part of your creative expression. It also can be the place where you play and that you're generous with other people. So that's all, what these Aquarius a full moon is lighting up. It's kind of funny having Aquarius here because it's very inventive. It's like your inventiveness is part of what the gift is you have to offer other people. So think about those creative processes. And then meanwhile, all of Leo season has really been about your community. Who are the people who support you? Who are the people that support your light, who want to see you smile and radiate and be joyful? So that's what Leo season has really been stirring up since July 22nd. So that's kind of these two places, the how you give yourself and then how you receive the love of your community is really the big topic here during this full moon. Both of these places are resources. The fifth house is your creative resource, the gifts you have to offer. The 11th house is the social resources that support you, that allow you to move in the world the way that you need to. And both of these are under a lot of pressure during this full moon because we have that T-square from Uranus. Uranus being in Taurus, so in your 8th house. There's been a big stirring of the pot since 2018 that has to do with the way you handle other people's stuff, the way you're able to set boundaries that work for you, boundaries that let you navigate the difficulties of other people's stuff. I mean, this is inevitable. We all have to do this. We all are going to bump into each other's shadow stuff or unconscious stuff or frustrations, repressed emotions, that sort of thing. So that's where a big change has been happening for quite some time. And that's really what's putting pressure on the sun moon opposition here at the full moon. So the moment in time you're looking at with the Aquarius full moon is giving you a chance to really see, how do I manage that? How do I manage the difficulty of other people's BS? And how can I make sure that I do the creative stuff that allows me to handle it? And again, that's going to be some kind of socializing or talking or some way of expressing yourself. It also might be that you need to do something tangible because it's an air sign there, and that would help to kind of ground anxious energy. So those are all things that are possibly on your mind at this time. And I really encourage you to use this Aquarius full moon to ask yourself about your creative energy and how you use it. All righty. Now we are going to talk about those of you who have Scorpio rising. Okay. All right. So those of you who have Scorpio rising, this Aquarius full moon is landing in your 4th house. That means that the full moon is symbolically lighting up everything that is to do with your family, your home life, your house, and your ancestry. So this is always the place of where you know, put your head at night, where you plant your feet when you're done with your work day. So the fourth house, it can be your physical home. It can be your lineage, and something to do with your ancestors would be a possibility here. It also could be your connection to land. And it's also the psychological, emotional foundation that we all have to set, the place where you have to self parent, a place where you have to find your own stability. All of those things are being lit up at this Aquarius full moon. Meanwhile, Leo season has really lit up your professional life. What has gone on in your professional life? What that you really are showing up in public? Like, what is the light that you're shining in this bright place at the top of your chart that has gone on since July 22nd during all of Leo season? And now at this moment in time, you're getting a chance to see, okay, how has all that impacted my family? You know, how am I able to have safe space at home? Like, is there room for me at home? Like, am I giving us enough at home? Like, all of those kinds of topics come up because it could be if you've had a very busy professional life in the last few weeks, it could be that you just haven't been very available. You've been a bit detached from your home life. So this Aquarius full moon just gives you a chance to see that and decide for yourself, hey, how have I been here? What adjustments might I need to make to feel more stable at home, for my family members to feel more stable with me? Those would be some of the questions coming into play. In the meantime, there's also some pressure coming from your seventh house, which is over here, where the number 7 is, and that is because Uranus has been a Taurus since 2018 and has been making some pretty big changes in the way you handle your partnerships. This could be an actual change in partners, with a spouse, with a business partner, in the way you interact with people on a one-on-one level. But it also just might be the way that you handle those things. In fact, that's usually my take. It's the way. So even if there haven't been any big overt changes, there's some changes internally about the way you handle that, the way you um, feel stabilized by your partnerships, the balance between feeling stabilized versus having more freedom to do other things. So those are some of the things that have been changing, and that is what is placing pressure on the full moon here. So that's the bigger story that's being illuminated or showing up. It could be too that you've had some busy thing happening at your work life. You're kind of, trying to figure out how you've been at home, and all of that has really impacted your partnership. So there's something about the way that those very main kind of identity areas of your life are interacting. So that's the main thing you want to look at this Aquarius full moon if you have Scorpio rising. Okay, we are now going to move on to those of you who have the fire sign of Sagittarius as your rising sign. Okay, so for those of you with Sagittarius, this Aquarius full moon is really showing something about the way that you communicate. This is a moment of time to evaluate your skill at communicating and asking yourself questions like, hey, is the way I communicate in service to my social groups, in service to my community? Is it serving a higher purpose rather than just like me deciding how I need to communicate and that's the end of it? It kind of brings a bigger thing to the way that you communicate, a bigger consideration, really. And this is against the backdrop of Leo season. Leo season has been occurring in your 9th house. So for those of you with Sagittarius rising, the 9th house is also a fire sign, and is a part of the way that you express yourself. In this case, it's the way that you express your life philosophy. It's the way that you take all of the accumulated experiences in your life and you see how they are formulated or shaped into a worldview. So every Leo season, you get a little view of like, how is my worldview? How has it changed? How is it the same? Am I able to think critically about issues that are on my mind? Those are all things that are going to be popping up during Leo season for you. In real life, this could be something to do with higher education. This could be have something to do with something that you're working on publishing. It could have something to do with some travel plans, or all of those pieces are going to be things that might have been illuminated in the past few weeks. And now at the Aquarius full moon, you're kind of getting to see, like, how has all of that impacted the way that I talk to people on the mundane level? Because that's what the full moon highlights. Also, because I talked a lot about the T-square at the beginning of this video, it's also worthwhile to know that the planet Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, and it has been stirring up change in your habits, in your routines, possibly could have stirred up some stuff about your physical health. But in any case, it's trying to draw attention to some changes that you need to make for your self-care. So that's the bigger story. That's a big, long, slow story. That's not a quick story. But it is the thing that's pressurizing this full moon and is really getting you to see at this moment in time of the full moon, what is it that you want to communicate? How does it pertain to your health? How does it impact your routines? How has the way that you talk changed in this time frame? So those are all things that you're going to want to think about, or that might come up. So using this full moon for just understanding how to use your voice for collective or humanitarian concerns. All righty. Okay. We are now going to move to those of you who have Capricorn rising. Okay, so those of you who have Capricorn rising, this is putting some light or it's illuminating the axis that has to do with values. This is, the opposite of Cancer rising. So Capricorn rising, you are back to considering, how you value yourself, how other people value themselves, and then what are the interactions between those two things. So what the Aquarius full moon is really showing for you is this getting you to see from an objective viewpoint the way in which you value yourself, the way in which you are able to love yourself. Do you understand the resources that you bring to other people? It's also illuminating things like your financial status. Maybe there's some financial considerations you want to think about. There could be some stress there. That wouldn't be surprising, as many people with that. Or it could be a time to figure out how to think about your future with your finances. Like maybe you're in a place where it's time to start setting aside more money for your retirement, that kind of thing. That's what the moment brings of the full moon. And this is against the backdrop of Leo season. So for the past few weeks, the sun has been in Leo, really showing you the way you deal with other people's stuff. It's in the 8th house up here, and the 8th house is that place where you encounter other people and the way they value themselves or fail to value themselves, other people's money issues, other people's hidden baggage, the stuff they don't really want to talk about, the skeletons in the closet. It's kind of that place where you bump up against other people's stuff and you don't really know what you bumped up against, except that something happened, somebody got triggered, or something doesn't feel the same. So for those of you Capricorn rising, you have a real gift of shining a light into other people's stuff. The way that you choose to live impacts that, shines a light for other people. So, and during every Leo season, it kind of highlights that. So now the full moon gives you a moment to go, hey, am I valuing myself enough? Am I doing what I need for my financial situation enough? Those are some of the topics that are going to come up most likely. And in the meantime, the planet Uranus has been in Taurus. It's been there since 2018, and it is tightly squaring this full moon axis. So it's placing a lot of pressure on that full moon axis. And now is really a time where you can kind of evaluate not just what's happened these past few weeks, but what changes have you made since 2018? How are you valuing yourself differently now than you were back then in 2018, about 6 years ago? So that's something to kind of put into the mix here as you consider this. And then also just consider Aquarius is a collective sign. So the way you value yourself, the way you are able to love yourself, the way you're able to give yourself enough space to do that is going to have an impact on everybody. It's going to impact the people around you. It's going to impact your social circles and who you come into contact with. And ultimately, it's going to impact the global collective. So, yeah, it's just a moment in time, but it's great to have those kind of check-ins. Okay. Alrighty, so we are now going to move to those of you who have Aquarius rising. All right. So for those of you with Aquarius rising, this full moon lights up the most powerful house in the chart, your first house. This is the house of self. It's the house of your appearance, your disposition, your physical constitution. All of those things are part of the first house. It's also that first impression people get. So for you, Aquarius rising, you walk in the room and like you're different. You offer something inventive, you offer something unique. You may be kind of considered sort of quirky, but you have something really different to offer other people, a humanitarian and futuristic type of view. So at this full moon, that's what's coming into play, something very personal about you and how you show up and how you show up with these collective concerns on your sleeve. In the meantime, Leo season every year always highlights the area of your life that represents your partnerships. So this can be marital partners, this can be one-on-one connections, good friends, anybody you're having a one-on-one conversation with. And it also can be business partners. I mean, anybody that you're trying to accomplish something together or trying to be together in an equal way are all coming into play. So every Leo season, you get a chance to see this place that you just show up in this warm and bright way. And then at the Aquarius full moon, you kind of can see the opposite of that, how you may show up as somebody who's potentially slightly aloof, but really on the inside, you are pretty darn warm and fuzzy. So there's something about that access, something about the way you look at your identity that is coming into play at the Aquarius full moon. In the meantime, we must talk about Uranus because Uranus is making that T-square with the full moon. So it's putting pressure on this part of your life and this part of your chart. And Uranus has been in your fourth house of home and family since 2018. So it has been stirring things up. I mean, sometimes it's even like a jackhammer, like breaking up old ways of being, old patterns you developed in your childhood and letting you step into being somebody new and different. Changing your emotional foundation into something more stable and something that you've handled, you've self-parented to get that way. So, something that's been going on that, or maybe you bought a new home, or maybe you've moved in that time frame, or moved a couple times, but there's something that's being stirred up at that basic level. And that is what is really placing a lot of pressure. Like that longer, slower change is the thing that you kind of get a glimpse into at this moment of time of the Aquarius full moon. You have a chance to kind of look with objectivity, like, hey, what shifted here and how has it affected the way that I am showing up in the world right now? And how do I want to show up at this full moon? So, no problem, right? Okay. So, we are going to move now to people who have Pisces rising. All right. So those of you with Pisces rising, this full moon is showing up in a rather mysterious place for you. It is showing up in your 12th house. And the 12th house is really the place of unseen forces. So there's a lot of things that fit into this category. There's your own subconscious patterns. There's if you have some kind of administrative role in society, you're kind of, have your hands on the levers of change, so it could be that. It can also be like channeling, energy, ghosts, ancestors that you don't even know you have, like this kind of this everything that's sort of behind you that you can't see. Is what the 12th house represents. So during the Aquarius full moon, you really have a chance to look with objectivity at what is going on with your subconscious processes, because that's kind of your interface between the rest of the life and the world and then those hidden unseen forces. Like it's the things that bubble up in your subconscious. And at the full moon, I imagine there's an opportunity to see some things that maybe you can't always see. And what do those have to do with? Well, because we're in Leo season and the sun has been in Leo cruising through your sixth house for a few weeks now, since July 22nd, you've had a chance to see a change in your routines, perhaps. You've illuminating what are your habits? What are your patterns? Like, are you getting enough sleep? What do you eat? What's your exercise like? Are you reducing your stress enough? Are you doing things like getting body work to help you reduce stress if you have things that are stressful in your life? Those are all things that Leo season may have brought up for you. So just thinking about that, and then looking at what is the Aquarius full moon kind of showing you, because if the 12th house is like your spirituality, well, the sixth house is your practices of how you incorporate that. So, like, let's say your meditation practice or your daily visualization practice. That's how those two things really work together. And that's what's being illuminated. Both of these places are places of learning. So, even though maybe they sound kind of heavy, there's a lighter touch here in a way. These are both places that you just simply need to learn. You're a learning, growing human. So, that's what this is about. Meanwhile, I talked a lot at the beginning of the video about the planet Uranus being in Taurus in the third house. And so, or, making a T-square to this full moon axis, and it is in your third house. That's what I meant to say. And so the third house is how you communicate. So since 2018, there has been a profound shift in the way you represent yourself. It might be in the way that you handle siblings, because siblings are part of the third house. It might be in the way you handle neighbors, because that's also part of it. It's the way you move through your local community. So that also has a transportation element to it, like, riding your bike or taking the bus or driving your car. Those are all pieces that are being affected by this Uranus and Taurus business. So at any rate, this full moon is an opportunity to see what is that bigger change, and to get a look into what are the subconscious patterns that have come about due to that longer, slower change that's been going on since 2018. So that's what you really want to look at. You want to have an open mind. Fortunately, you have the ability to be very objective about those things because you have Aquarius in your 12th house. So anyway, that is what this is about for you. So wishing you luck with that. Okay. And I think that we have now come to the end of the video here. Thank you very much for watching. Very much hope that Lori will be back and feeling better really, really soon. And please don't hesitate to post any comments. And thank you very much. Bye.